For those of you that don't really know who I am or what I do, my name is Evan Snow. I'm an arts advocate, community builder, creative entrepreneur. Very proud to be born and raised in Broward County. And a few years ago, I was a regular Johnny 9 to 5 recruiter, sitting at a desk, listening to some TED Talks on my lunch break, and I got some inspiration to make a series of choices that led me down this crazy path of arts, culture, and creative entrepreneurship. And I think, in all reality, if I was able to make these choices to step outside of my comfort zone, anybody can make these choices and unlock their hidden potential, which is what I'm trying to do now with this book, which I'll tell you about a little bit later. But before all that, I like to tell people, give some context of how I kind of got here. It was my parents, obviously. My parents went through something, and there's going to be some questions along the way. There's a quiz, there's no right or wrong answer. You guys ever heard of landmark education, landmark form? Anybody ever heard of S training? Yeah. So my parents were deep in that back in the 70s and knew Warner Earhart. And somehow the universe connected them with my mother living in Kendall, which is South Miami, my father living in North Miami. They met without cell phone, internet, or GPS. It was magical. They were really deep into this work. They really loved helping people. Landmark, for those of you who don't know, it was kind of like personal development seminar workshop, like the gratitude training, before gratitude training. So they were really into that. And I feel like it's worth sharing that those genes are embedded in my DNA that contribute to me wanting to help people and help myself and transform. The other thing that's worth mentioning, are you familiar with the game of lacrosse?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Growing up, it was not a popular game. It used to only be in Long Island, New York, and Maryland.
Oh, is it popular now?
And well, I started playing, when I played in 5th grade, it was a club sport. It was in private schools. We would only play against St. Andrews and all these private school teams. My father, my godfather, and a bunch of other passionate volunteers and coaches advocated for the game of lacrosse to the point that the year after I finished school, it became an FHSAA public school sport. So now it's in all the public schools. So I feel like that, and I watched my father go to these school board meetings and go to these state meetings and all these meetings and conferences when he really didn't have to. And I feel like those advocacy genes are embedded in my DNA. So I feel like that kind of gives some context as to where I came from. That might not be so apparent. But what is apparent was, fortunately, my parents made a great choice to move to a little town called Coral Springs in Broward County. Very, suburban, white, blue-collar area, a lot of parks. I had a great childhood growing up, played sports, tumbled, mommy and me, all those things. I was a great baby. And then 4th grade comes around, 5th grade comes around, I start, speaking up. And I started saying and doing the things that all the other kids were thinking, but nobody wanted to say because they didn't want to get in trouble. How many of you have kids? How many of your kids got in trouble? Right? I don't have kids. I can only imagine it's difficult. But I'm kind of here to share some of this with you to let you know, even no matter how old your kids are, there is a brighter another path, because the school system was not for me, right? And I didn't know this path was ahead of me either. I spent a lot of time in internal and external suspension, and I was never getting arrested. I wasn't going to jail. I was just speaking up and just getting in trouble. So fortunately, there was a brighter path ahead of me. I will tell you, for those of you that do have kids that are still in school, I'm a high school and college dropout. I went all the way to the end of, we have some more chairs if you'd like. I went all the way to the last semester of my senior year. I was not a good student. They go, you're going to be one class short. We're not doing summer school. You're going to have to come back for a 5th year of high school. And thankfully, I was walking out the door that day, and there was a guidance counselor that liked me, and he said, you know what? You just go get a GED. You're going to be all right. And in college, I took all my credits. I took pre-algebra and the pre-maths. I could not wrap my head around the shit I knew I was never going to use in the supermarket. Yeah. And I still have never used it in the supermarket. So I got all my credits except for 2 math classes. I'm not a proud high school and college dropout, but once again, I was able to figure out some things. So when you don't have a college degree, that only leaves you with so many jobs you can do. So I started doing some sales jobs, and then basically sales got me in, and I started playing poker in between there. I was a product of the Chris Moneymaker poker boom back in the day, and playing poker got me interested or invited to a job called recruiting. You guys know staffing, headhunting? Yeah. You learn how to fit a square peg in a round hole. You help people get jobs, and it is rewarding and fulfilling because you are helping people earn a living and move in their career or whatever. But it is a very thankless job. It's very grueling. So while I was doing this recruiting thing, I'm listening to TED Talks on my lunch break. Couldn't get enough of these TED Talks. I started going to my parents' house to watch them. Fortunately, Nova Southeastern, they started hosting TED Talks, and I started going with my mom every single year. It's one of our favorite things to do. And I had a friend and mentor who, a recurring theme here, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, that said, I'm renting space in a co-working space. They're hosting a monthly breakfast lecture series, a mini TED Talk for free. You should come. Have you guys heard of Creative Mornings? Yeah. All right, this was before the Palm Beach one. This was in Fort Lauderdale. I go, the first one, great guy, coffee roaster, local legend, kind of dry and boring, super nice guy. I said, I don't know about this Creative Mornings thing, and give it a second chance. The second one was a guy by the name of Adam Garfield. He founded a company called Speedy Tab. He invented ordering drinks ahead on your cell phone, sold it to Visa for however many millions of dollars. His story was really good. But the third one was the one that changed my life. It was a woman, she used to be here, she grew up in Palm Beach County. Her name's Alexa Rose Carlin. She started something called the Women in Power Expo. It was very popular before COVID, and COVID kind of put a stop on that. But she was speaking on the topic of language. And the talk wasn't that we speak the language of English, Hebrew, or Spanish. She was more speaking, if you speak the language of positivity, you'll portray positivity. If you speak the language of unworthiness, your actions will be unworthy. And more so than that, she had a very interesting story. She was going on a bright path in college, got a bacterial infection, developed sepsis, got in a coma, 1% chance of living, saw herself running through the green field of grass, got out of the coma, became a speaker, author, founder of this Women in Power Expo, and she ultimately empowered me by preaching to be genuine, be authentic, and pursue your passions. And at this time, I was really enjoying going to cool restaurants. This is in 2014. Any of you guys remember Foursquare?
Yes.
It was like Vimeo. It was Yelp before Yelp. So you would go and you would check in, and you might post a picture. I wasn't really doing anything with it, but my friends would say, I like the places that Snow stops at, because I go by my last name, I don't really like my first name. So I'm at a training seminar for a business I was considering getting into, and on the break, some woman was telling me she was doing this new thing I never heard of called blogging. You guys familiar with blogging? This was in 2014. She was telling me she was getting paid to get free stuff to write articles about it, and it was very Rob Report-esque. So it was watches and shoes and luxury stuff. So I kind of made a little mental bookmark. I'm considering at this time moving from the western suburbs of Broward County to downtown Fort Lauderdale with two Honduran brothers by way of Memphis that came to South Florida that I was enjoying hanging out with. And we were starting to go to more and more restaurants. So one of them encouraged me to start Snow Stop's food blog. So I'm doing a little food blogging. I'm still recruiting, and they had a social movement in Memphis called Choose 901. And it was so popular back in 2014, it had 70,000 Instagram followers, which was a lot back then, especially for a place not so savvy on social media. But they would use it in conversation. His friends, when they would come into town, they would say, David doesn't choose 901 because David doesn't go back to Memphis. So I was like, this Choose 901 thing is kind of interesting. I reach out, I talk to one of the co-founders. He tells me Choose 901 was started by the church to teach people computer skills to improve their employment opportunities, because Memphis, while it's a great city, a lot of history and culture, it has 2 of the 5 worst neighborhoods in the country, North and South Memphis. Despite that, I decided to go to Memphis to see the impact of this Choose 901 thing for their World Championship Barbecue Festival during Memphis in May. Have you guys ever heard of that? Add that to your bucket list. I learned more that now Choose 901, it's acquired by the city. They're using it as a recruitment tool to teach or to recruit teachers, paramedics, and firefighters who want to live and work in Memphis. So I'm like, all right, this is kind of cool. I go, I have a great time, one of the best festivals I've ever been to of all time. I come back, I'm supercharged, inspired, and at this time, this was in 2015, Flagler Village was just Flagler Village, Fat Village, Mass District, the Arts Districts in Fort Lauderdale. They were just coming up. Wynwood had already kind of been making the rounds and becoming popular. This was before the Wynwood effect, but before the gentrification and all that. So, and I love Wynwood. I never pass up an opportunity to go to Wynwood. I was there anytime, every art walk, any event, I was going to Wynwood. But I just moved to downtown Fort Lauderdale, and I'm like, we should have more of this in Fort Lauderdale, where I'm from. So 1 month before the art walk, with my cell phone and a hashtag, I start Choose 954 to show people all the cool things that were going on in Fort Lauderdale and Broward County, where I was from, but I was out every single day and I didn't see people I grew up with, so I felt if I could show them better than I could tell them, it would give them reasons to choose the 954. And I started it to cultivate culture and community in my native Broward County in an effort to make it a better place to live and not just a better place to vacation. Because I live there and we all live in South Florida, right? So, very modest beginnings, social, Instagram Lives, Facebook Lives, started a little podcast, and then, really had no idea what I was doing with it. I had just left recruiting to join entrepreneurial, which really means I was driving Uber and Lyft to make ends meet. And I do, I put that in the book. It's not something everybody knows, but I wanted it to give me the flexibility to go and see and do all the things I wanted to do without having to go lie to a boss at a desk and say, oh, I'm, going to a business meeting. No, I'm going to go see some fucking art. Yeah. So, a woman I met at one of these monthly Breakfast Lecture Series events, she was a lawyer, college professor, a radio show host, brilliant woman. She invited me to the Tower Club, which is the members-only, formerly Good Old Boys Club, atop the Regions Bank building in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Used to be very white, very stuffy, very private. I never heard of it before. I'd never been there before. She was airing a TED simulcast event where she played Amanda Palmer, The Art of Giving, where she was a street performer and a musician, and she just wanted to give her music away. And she ended up having massive success and millions of copies, and it was one of the top 10 TED Talks of all time at that time. Still is. So after the event's over, some old gray-haired guy to my right was like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I just started this Choose 954 thing. Could have cared less. But thankfully, there was a very sharply dressed Trinidadian brother to my left, wearing a Zara suit with a dolly mustache, and he goes, well, that's kind of interesting. He's like, that's kind of interesting. Why don't we meet for coffee here? And come to find out, that person was Andrew. And come to find out, Andrew was me 10 years before social media. But he got burnt out because he didn't have a partner to go with him on this journey. And this is a fucking journey. So I had interviewed thousands of people from being a recruiter. Well, tell me about your job history, this led to that led to this. My job history was very brief. I told you, college dropout, did a little cell phone sales, did a little recruiting, played a little poker. He blew me the fuck away. He came to this country from Trinidad to pursue his American dream, went to Miami School of Art and Design, now it's like the International Fine Arts College. His college professor was Lawrence Gartell, the pioneer of digital art. He had shared studio spaces with the big artists back in the day in Wynwood, where they would chip in $100 a month rent, Brandon Apopka, Fekuop, and all these big time artists. But he would tell me he wanted to be an artist, but he liked nice things, so he couldn't be a full-time artist, so he got into advertising. He worked for two of the largest advertising agencies in the world, Saatchi and JWT. He did advertising for some of the biggest home builders, GL Homes, Gulfstream Park, Royal Caribbean. He was involved in many early stages Art as Entrepreneur. He developed Art as an Entrepreneur. Vision 2020 for Broward County, he had done all that. He was president of the American Advertising Federation. He had a wealth of experience. He really did not need me at all. But we shared a passion for the arts, for advocating for the arts. The arts was slowly having a more profound impact on my life, and I really just wanted to make it more available to my home community of Broward County. So on the third meeting, we were thinking about the things that were missing in Broward County. And you guys know Art Basel? All right, Art Basel, for those of you that aren't really so familiar, it is the biggest art event in the world. 1 million people come, it contributes $1 billion to their local economy. It's single-handedly contributed to the revitalization of Miami post the Cocaine Cowboys Paradise Lost days. Fact. No argument. So we have this tented fair on Las Olas that happens 4 times a year that nobody's flying in to go and see. That in all reality, have you guys ever done it? Howard Allen?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I mean, nice guy. They sell.
I've never done it, but yeah, I've been to it.
They do the same fair all over. No one's flying in to go see it. There's no after party. There's no artist talk. It is what it is. So we're like, we should do something different. And I had never really done an event. But I said, I have this idea. I want to do a Basel in Broward. And Andrew goes, I always wanted to do Basel in Broward. And we're like, well, we don't want to do what everybody else does in a tent, a convention center, or a hotel. We have these unique elements to Fort Lauderdale. We have beautiful homes on the intercoastal waterways, the Venice of the Americas. We have a water taxi. What if we did the first art fair in the world to take place inside of mansions that were for sale and make it only accessible via boat to mitigate all of the problems that we found with going to Art Basel? You got to fight for parking, the traffic, you go into a huge maze, you get art fatigue. Here, you could go on the boat, go from house to house, have time to think about what you just saw. And our goal when we set out was to put Fort Lauderdale on the art world map as an international destination to view and interact with art. And that was really it. So you would think if you came up with a world-changing idea like this to revolutionize the art fair world, the city would want to get involved, the county would want to get involved, the business community would want to get involved. Well, if we were going to wait around for a check, we would still be waiting. So fortunately, my business partner, God bless him, my about-to-be business partner, wasn't even my business partner yet, he opened his piggy bank and his 401k to the tune of $50,000 to fund the art fair. And I do not know anybody that I've met before or since then who would do that. Do you know anybody that would do that that's not independently wealthy? I've never met a single person. He also had a Swiss Army knife of skills, advertising, marketing, logo, branding, website, PR, that we did everything to absorb those costs, because if we had to hire all these different people, we never would have got this thing off the ground. I just had a lot of drive and desire, and I was like listening to Gary Vee, getting a lot of motivation for entrepreneurship and blah, blah, blah. So we do the art fair, it ran, Anthony was in it the first year, and it ran for 4 years until COVID. It was a beautiful thing. We hope to bring it back. COVID obviously put it on pause. But long story short, that led to us getting involved with the real estate board. Getting involved with the real estate board had developers and commercial property owners say, hey, you want to do art in our space? Oh yeah, by the way, we're not going to pay you for it. So we were leaving a meeting one day. That day we left this meeting, an article came out in the newspaper that said Broward County was one of the least affordable counties for housing in the country. We left the meeting kind of dejected. It was like a sure thing we were going to get a contract from somebody, and like they said no for like no reason. So we see all these for lease signs, and we kind of turn and look to each other. And we're like, well, what if there was no more empty spaces? And what if we could make this one of the most affordable places for artists to create it? And what if there were 0 empty spaces? So we came up with 0 empty spaces. Andrew had experience working as a marketing executive for the Westfield Corporation, which is one of the largest mall companies in the world. he would take underutilized portion of the food court in the mall and make a commission-free art gallery as an arts advocate. So he already had these kind of vacancy management skills in his back pocket. We reach out to Dean Trantellis, mayor of Fort Lauderdale, say, hey Dean, we got this idea. At the time, Las Olas, every third door was closed. There was 19 vacancies. It was $86 a square foot. Nobody was gonna pay that. I mean, we get a meeting with him. The dean says you should reach out to Mike Weymouth, the owner. We get a meeting with him. Everybody always told us he was a tough cookie. Took the guy 3 minutes. Gives us space. It was vacant 3 years. And long story short, we're in there. We have the widest attended opening of anything on Fort Lauderdale because it was different. It wasn't an art gallery opening. It was a studio with local artists. NPR, PBS. It was great. All those artists sold more than they ever have in their lifetime. One guy sold $40,000 worth of American flag paintings in 1 month. An artist that was a director of investment banking for the largest company in Broward County left her job to pursue art full time. And that proved the model to us that this was a real thing, that we could do this. And fortunately, well, you know, the model proved, and then that since led to 29 spaces over the last 4 years. We're now in 3 states. We've had 400 artists like yourselves come through the program, and I know in this space specifically that the program and the initiative has changed hundreds of artists' lives thousands of times over. And I would love at some point to hear more success stories that you might or might not have shared with me previously, because this really is my oxygen. This is really a big part of my why. I never would have imagined when I set out with my cell phone and a hashtag to show artists whose studios I was visiting who probably never had anybody come and visit, let alone give them promotion, let alone give them support. Never would have imagined it would lead to us taking a former Burberry store next to Louis Vuitton in the Natick Mall and making the first art studios in the world next to Louis Vuitton. It doesn't exist. So I say that to say this, I'm a regular guy. I was able to make some choices to step outside of my comfort zone that led me down this path of arts, culture, community building, creative entrepreneurship. If I'm able to unlock my hidden potential, anybody's. I'm truly nothing special. I'm a regular fucking guy from Coral Springs that used to go to the sports bar to watch the Miami Heat games and the Miami Hurricane football games. And the first time I went to Wynwood, Art Basel 2014, that I went for art, I posted on Facebook, does anybody want to go to Art Basel? Nobody responded. I got in the car and I went by myself. It was the best decision I ever made in my life. And that's what I'm trying to share with this book here, is not just my story, but learning lessons along from this story to hopefully help you make some choices to improve your life, your community, or your world, or whatever the fuck's important to you. Does that all make sense? Okay. Just read a little bit, and then, you know, glad to answer any questions. But the one part actually that I do like to generally close with is, obviously I was doing a lot, and also I started some nonprofits that some artists came to me. They said, I want to put sculptures on top of rocks and put them in the ocean, call them artificial reefs, and oh yeah, by the way, we want to make them mermaids. I had no idea what the fuck that meant. They showed me a documentary on Netflix called Chasing Coral. Have any of you guys ever heard of that? Oh wow, it's pretty good. Most people never heard of it. It was made by the same people that made Seaspiracy, which got a lot more fanfare. If you go see it, it was my aha moment. It woke me up to the situation plaguing our coral reefs. I'm now an advocate for art. So I'm like, wow, these reefs don't have an advocate. You know, they're out of sight, out of mind for so many people. I like to think art's a problem solver. We got vacant commercial real estate, we got artists that need space, boom, problem solved. So, started doing this reef project. Long story short, we put 105 of them off the coast of Southeast Florida, 80 in Palm Beach County, right here off Blue Heron Bridge, Riviera Beach. and now 25 in Hollywood. But I'm going to read the chapter that I'm very proud and glad to share with all of you guys, because it's a much needed self-care resource, and it's had a profound impact on my life. So each chapter I start with a quote, and this chapter is learning to choose yoga during COVID. And the quote is, "Yoga is the journey of the self, through the self, to the self." And that was quoted in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the big famous yoga book. So, the way this story goes is, while some of my business ventures took a hit during COVID, other things thrived. Ever since I was a child, I knew I wanted to do better in life, I knew I needed to do better, and I knew I could do better. I had explored a few different personal interests with mixed success over the years, ultimately abandoning those which didn't serve the desired purpose. The majority of these explorations involved an exercise, a game, or a sport where I would feel a sense of accomplishment upon completing the activity. The earliest of these explorations was in No Limit Texas Hold'em Poker, a game that exploded in popularity as I was exiting high school and stuck with me for 10 plus years. While I had moderate success at times, the thrill of winning didn't surpass the disdain I had for sitting around a table with people who, for the most part, were miserable in life. While that game boomed in popularity, a few years later I discovered a love for a sport which was losing its popularity, racquetball. Though it makes for a lot of fun and great exercise, you ultimately need other players of similar skill level and caliber to play with. While there was a decent-sized group of people playing near where I grew up in the suburbs, racquetball players were few and far between when I moved to Fort Lauderdale in 2015, which led me to giving up the game. In years to follow, I continued exercising in the gym of my apartment building, doing cardio, lifting weights 1 or 2 days a week to stay active, but having grown up as an athlete playing lacrosse and basketball, I could tell my body wanted more. When 2020 came around, the building I had been living in since moving to downtown Fort Lauderdale in 2015 quickly became overpriced, and I was faced with yet another decision. There was a brand new building for which a friend of mine was doing public relations, and it touted the societal, community feel filled with lots of perks, amenities, and events. It probably wasn't the best financial decision to move into Society Los Olas during a pandemic, but I knew something positive was waiting for me there, and that it was time to move on from the older building that had served its purpose. When I was thinking about what was in store for me, I thought the best I could hope for was a new business contact or a potential future Mrs. Snow. But little did I know that at a time I needed it more than ever, my life would change in a way that I needed it the most. I rediscovered my zest for learning and growing in a whole new way. It was on my second trip to Tulum, Mexico with my nonprofit, the Ocean Rescue Alliance, when the shift happened, and only now that I have some appreciation for portals and vortexes can I recognize this shift. The second day we were there, we arose early to see the sunrise and headed to the north end of the beach in the state park where the lighthouse was located, south of the Tulum ruins. I was developing a hobby of making videos for social media to document my adventures, flying my newly acquired drone and doing time lapses of sunrises with my GoPro to show my friends and family. This was at a time when I didn't necessarily need more hobbies, but felt it could be beneficial to our business ventures and initiatives for me to have these skills and resources. Little did I know that after I used up all of my batteries that morning capturing the sunrise, I would discover a hobby that was way more beneficial to me in my life than anything I could have ever imagined or experienced before. My nonprofit partner decided to start trekking up the beach to explore the ruins of a vacant lighthouse we were supporting the restoration of, approximately a 10-minute walk each way, which left her friend, who was with us on the trip, and myself with some time waiting around on the beach. And then it happened. Her friend, whom I had only just met the day before, somehow had the intuition to turn to me and say, "Hey, you want to do some yoga?" To which I responded, "Sure." And that was the moment that the portal opened up for me and life would never be the same again. This friend was not a trained yoga instructor, just a practitioner, and he had discovered the practice was beneficial for his life in his early 20s. It started off innocently enough as I began following along while he moved into some standard yoga poses, which included planks, sun salutations, and downward dogs, otherwise known as a vinyasa flow. I thought to myself, well, this isn't as difficult as I remembered it. Recollecting the one time I tried to flow on the beach previously with an old high school classmate who was going through her certification process, though the practice at that time did not resonate with me. We probably practiced for 10 or 15 minutes, but inevitably, as I was come to find out, that was all I needed. I remember we were on the go a lot that trip and weren't going to have time for cardio or working out aside from walking up and down the beach, but almost instantly, I began feeling better after this little practice. I was taking my health more seriously after getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes earlier in the year, just after the beginning of COVID, and would do cardio a few times a week, but not as much as I could have or should have. I always stretched beforehand, remembering calisthenics from warming up in my lacrosse days, but those light stretches were not like this and were not done with the same intention. A lot of people at the beginning of the pandemic said they wanted to come out of it a better version than they went into it, and I also shared similar sentiments, but was missing the catalyst for change. I had bought some exercise bands for home workouts in my apartment, would ride my bike a little further than I had previously to get fresh air, but was honestly not pushing myself to that next level to realize the changes my body desperately needed and was secretly yearning for. Fortunately, by November 2020, I had moved into this new building where an old mutual acquaintance from the arts district, actually a Mass district, Chloe Ravel, was leading a free yoga class in the mornings located on my new, beautiful 25th floor open green space area overlooking most of Broward County. A few weeks after moving in and prior to the Tulum trip, I had gone up to this space one morning to marvel at the sunrise, flying my drone during the yoga class, which Chloe kindly invited me to join, though I had no real intention of pursuing yoga at that time. Well, that all changed after I connected with a young, attractive woman living in my building who I saw via her Instagram was going to this 7:30 a.m. yoga class. While passing the time in Tulum, I asked Chloe via Instagram DM if she would put in a good word for me with this girl, which prompted her to reply with the words that would ultimately change my life: come to yoga. Needless to say, that was the invitation I needed, and to spare the details I don't care to recount, even though I'm about to share them with you, the girl inevitably disappeared, but the yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and all of the other benefits remained in my life. It was the feeling of my body opening up for me initially in ways I had never felt before that did it for me and really started me on this journey. For anyone who's ever done an hour-long yoga class, you'll never forget that first Shavasana, or corpse pose, where you lie on your back after finishing the physical flow portion of the class and have an opportunity to just be there with your thoughts, feeling amazing. Then I found out there was more to yoga, including breathing, meditation, sound bowls, and this little thing I had been missing out in life called mindfulness that became prevalent in my life as a major game changer. I was constantly on the go before COVID, doing my best to balance all of my community projects and initiatives, and had already burned myself out multiple times over in the first few years of my entrepreneurial journey. Despite not taking my exercising habits as seriously as I could have the first 6 months of the pandemic, I was now a man on a mission, and I started with one morning class that was offered per week religiously, then discovered there was a second free class another night during the week that was even more of a chill vinyasa flow, a method of yoga in which movements form a flowing sequence in coordination with the breath, and I was hooked. Then I discovered Yoga with Adrian on YouTube and the immense amount of resources available on the internet for free if you search for them. As a result, I developed a daily practice of much needed movement, and while it didn't always include a full flow, it was essential in helping me stay grounded and balanced, as well as making my body change in ways I had always dreamt of. I was starting to see my abs from all of the planks, my shoulders stopped shaking while in the downward dog pose and became well defined, and I was starting to feel openings in different parts of my body I would later find out were related to our chakras, our energy centers. Fast forward 6 months to me becoming Chloe's most regular and loyal student in the building, I made another decision I always wanted to but had hesitated on making. I engaged Chloe for her paid coaching program. While this initially was to help me take my yoga practice to the next level, the introduction of new healing modalities, mindfulness practices, and energy work not only took my yoga practice to the next level, but my whole life. This included one-on-one sample healing sessions, Reiki, data healing, and so much more. The implementation of my new daily morning routine that we developed and began expanding on helped me start my day with more clarity than Adderall or Vyvanse ever could. This included waking up to positive affirmations, then listening to motivational speakers' videos on YouTube while eating my breakfast, taking my vitamins and supplements, followed by my morning meditation, and finally capped off by, at a minimum, some yoga stretches if I didn't have time for a full flow. My mornings, my days, and my life have never been the same since. The level of energy, alertness, and care for the communities I serve and the work that I do reach new heights, higher than I could have ever hoped for naturally. The level of connection I've been able to establish with my friends, family, and even strangers has been incredible. For all the times I would say everything happens for a reason, this one definitely did, and I'm forever grateful for the impact Chloe Ravel had on my life and the work we did together, and for her being there for me as a friend, guide, and guru. Chloe was there for me in ways I could never fully describe in this book or many others at a time when I needed her the most. Unfortunately, while this next part isn't fun or easy to remember, I felt it was important to vulnerably share. The woman in my building I had pursued to get into yoga ultimately led me on in conversation over a period of time, expressing interest in conversations to the point I assumed and hoped she would give me a chance romantically. On paper, she seemed like a great catch, but on some level, I knew something was off about her intentions. She had opened up to me when it was pretty apparent she wasn't opening up to other people in the building, at least at yoga, and I thought, admiring from afar, starting off as friends, and eventually building a close connection could show her I was a good potential partner, similar to how I thought she was a good match for me. After a few months, it appeared her interest came around more as we began going out and spending more time together. But the way the story goes, it wasn't meant to be, and the best thing that didn't happen to me was probably the best thing to happen for me. Out of the blue one day, this woman ghosted me, stopping all communications. This sudden halt in our friendship and communication was hard for me, and it got worse when I ran into her in our apartment building's elevator after weeks of not talking with someone who ended up becoming a new boyfriend. To make things more complicated for me internally, a series of strange coincidences, run-ins, and interactions took place around this time with this woman, and the signals before the elevator run-in were more than mixed. I was starting to experience deep emotional trauma, anxiety, and at times depression, having thought I was on the path to my first promising romantic relationship in years. In my mind, this would have made for a great story, since she was the one I attributed with getting me into yoga and inspiring me, changing my life for the better. I continually beat myself up over the story way too hard, and thankfully, my coach and friend, Chloe, was there to have my back and save me a ton more misery. She knew which mindful exercise, breathing technique, and healing modality I should apply as I kept her abreast of this situation, which was weighing on me heavily. More so than that, around this time, Chloe introduced me to the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, a man who changed my life and many others. Dr. Joe's postgraduate training includes the fields of neuroscience and neuroplasticity, quantitative electrophenologram QEEG measurements, epigenetics, mind-body medicine, and brain and heart coherence. Suffice it to say, he is on the cutting edge of helping people heal themselves through the power of the mind, as outlined in his most notable book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. It was this book and some of the key lessons and takeaways which Chloe helped reiterate into my brain that helped me get through this dark and difficult time of disappointment and despair. At this time, I found living in Fort Lauderdale no longer served me, and I didn't want to have any more chance encounters with the aforementioned woman in my building or around town, so it's time for change in scenery. I inevitably moved out of this building after my first year lease, and while not having access to 2 free yoga classes via an elevator ride weekly was disappointing at first, it actually served as a blessing in disguise. Fortunately, the building I subsequently moved into in downtown Hollywood with my new roommate, Seth, aka the Mindful Doctor, who was also a certified yoga instructor and dedicated practitioner, had a yoga studio literally 1 block away on the same street. This is where I would develop my studio practice and fall even deeper in love with yoga. The schedule of offerings was phenomenal, and for $100 per month, I could take as many classes as I wanted, which would occasionally peak at $25 per month. While taking classes with an infrared heater helped me push my mind, body, and soul even further than I ever had before, there was a whole nother realm of yoga I was about to discover. Thankfully, at this studio, these weren't all traditional vinyasa or active classes that you might think of, but almost more important to me was the introduction of yin yoga, a much slower, grounded, restorative flow, which included holding your body in passive positions for 2 to 5 minutes each. This allowed for opening of new spaces in my back, shoulders, hips, and parts of my body I did not know existed. Most times, these were in the evening after long days of work, and I had never experienced a better way to unwind than lying on my yoga mat as an adult and giving my body the time and space it needed to recover. The teachers were amazing, coming from all different backgrounds and walks of life, and I truly felt at home with my newfound tribe and my newfound vibe. Simultaneously, I had continued diving deeper into my personal development journey and seeing how much growth I could accomplish. While my weekly sessions with Chloe ended after our 3-month coaching program concluded, we continued working together monthly, and she thankfully was there for me to help me take my yoga practice to even greater heights, while instructing me on ways to maneuver my body to avoid injury, which is key. Through this exploration and development of my studio practice, I met so many new friends, experienced so much growth mentally and physically, and fortunately was there to support my new roommate and friend, Seth, in a pet project he wanted to start that he described to me as a conscious men's circle, which would meet weekly. While I loved interpersonal communication, personal development, and in-person meetings, if you would have told me I would be involved in the men's group just a year before this, I don't know what I would have said. Fortunately, with 2 other like-minded men we formed a local chapter of the Arca Brotherhood and began holding weekly meetings in our apartment. While we don't practice yoga in the meetings, there are many mindful components, including opening each meeting with 3 rounds of Wim Hof breathing, shares of gratitude, and other mindful exercises intended to help us connect to ourselves and each other on a deeper level. At the time of writing this, I've been attending our weekly circle for 1 year now and don't know where I would be without it. These meetings serve as a therapeutic healing session for me and my fellow brothers, more so than anything else. It's not really that spiritual or woo-woo, but it definitely takes an open mind and some conscious intention to do this work, and I could never thank the practice of yoga enough for opening me up to this world I did not know existed. There are very few things I cannot endorse more than considering starting your own yoga practice. It might just change your life. Each chapter ends with learning lessons, so this one is, have you thought about taking your life to the next level? Is there some self-improvement work you've wanted to do but have been putting off trying? Have you tried something a second time after it might not have worked out as perfectly as it could have the first time? What is self-care to you? I encourage you to put the book down and take a deep moment of reflection on these questions. After you do, pick up a journal, a post-it note, or a voice recorder, and relay the thoughts that flow through your mind onto whichever method you choose to permanently put them into the universe. Revisit them, maybe in a week, maybe in a month, and look back on how far you've grown since you initially answered those questions. The sky truly is the limit, and I hope to see you on the mountaintop one day. Thank you very much. So, the regular guy, pursued some passions, stepped outside my comfort zone, made some choices. Now we're here now, living my purpose, helping people, changing lives, doing the work. So if I could do it, you could do it, anyone could do it, your kids could do it. So that's that. And if anybody has any questions, glad to answer. And if not, no problem. Do you sign your book? Yes. No problem. I have it recorded. I have them on YouTube. Yeah, and I do have books. I will sign it, make a nice little dedication.